Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show. I'm your host Soni Haroon, and today we will be discussing identity and the Muslim woman and how faith influences identity. To help me discuss this topic, I have here with me Halima Ahmed, a law graduate and a convert and a mother of two. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show, Halima.
Wa alaikum salam.
And Natasha Ansari, an accountant by profession and a mother of three. Welcome to the show, Natasha. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, what is identity and how does faith influence identity?
Well, I think identity is such a vast topic. There's aspects of our identity which you can't change. For instance, your age, your race, your ethnic origin. Then I think there are aspects of your identity which are changeable. For example, your occupation, your location, even your nationality, things like that. Then you also have psychological characteristics of your identity, your personal behaviours, your traits, things like that.
I think it's quite multifaceted as well. It doesn't specifically have to be one thing. It can be several ways that you perceive yourself or you want people to perceive you. But ultimately, as Muslims, then we take our guidance from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So faith influences identity then,
Exactly.
and how does it influence identity? I think it's a core part of our identity, but how does it influence it? What do we do? And
I think intrinsically it affects us to the extent that the way that we see everything around us, the way that we see ourselves. In Islam we're told that even our body has rights upon us. So we have to love ourselves, we have to love Allah, we have to love ourselves, and then that love should kind of spread, and we should be able to deliver it and manifest it in the way that we behave with other people.
Totally agree. And also in the Quran, it tells us explicitly our identity is the reason we are here, put on this earth, is to worship Allah. So that is our core basis for our identity, is to worship Allah. We are the slave of Allah, and then from that is what then influences our duties and responsibilities to others around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
so how do these duties and responsibilities come into identity?
So, like I was saying, our first duty and responsibility is to Allah, to worship Him as He has commanded us to worship Him. Then we have a responsibility first and foremost to ourselves. There's a hadith which says, even your body has rights upon you. So you must make sure that you're well rested, you eat good food, not just halal, but tayyib food that is good for you. You exercise, you look after your body, you don't do harmful things to your body. So these are rights that we have upon ourselves. And then we have rights, for our family members. If we're our mother, our rights to our children, our rights to our parents, our husband, and then Natasha to the wider community as well.
I think the beauty of Islam is the fact that from a micro level we've been told how we should behave with our parents, our children, our neighbours even, and then on a micro level how we behave with the outer community, giving sadaqah, giving charity, integrating ourselves with people. These are things that are actually encouraged in Islam.
And this is our religious identity,
Yeah.
and then we have the cultural identity. And how are these two different? Because culture plays a big part in our lives.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting question because they are distinctively different, two different forms of identity. Culture is obviously our cultural heritage, where we were born, the environment that we lived in, etc. That affects us. That's the culture. And then you have the religious identity, which is obviously our faith. The guidelines that has been defined in the Quran and the Sunnah. And I think sometimes particularly maybe in the subcontinent, people kind of mix the two up. And sometimes it can be perhaps it can lead to innovations within Islam. So I think we have to be very careful in certain situations that we need to give our religious identity precedence above our cultural identity.
I think you're absolutely right. Definitely religious identity, Islamic identity should always prevail over cultural identity if there is a conflict. But I think where there isn't a conflict, You should embrace your cultural heritage. That's where you're from. That's where you were born. There are so many beautiful things about, different cultures that can be embraced. And Allah said in the Quran that He's made you nations and tribes so that you can, know one another. I find what's happening is a lot of people are adopting, let's say, ways and cultures from Saudi Arabia, thinking that it's Islamic, but it's maybe not Islamic, but more cultural Arabic culture rather than Islamic culture. An example can be, the long thobe that the men wear in Saudi Arabia. They wear it because they're in the desert, it's really hot, it's conducive to their environment to wear long flowing clothes. So that's in their culture. It doesn't, not that I know of, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that's what they should wear. Obviously they have to maintain their modesty, men do as well as women. But I find a lot of youth and youth in the Western world adopt that way of dress, thinking it is Islamic, whereas I don't think it is. So they're kind of mixing it up, even though it's not their own cultural heritage. They're rejecting their own cultural heritage and adopting that of Arab nations, thinking it's Islamic, but technically it's really not.
Yeah. And I don't think it's even necessary at times. I think this diversity makes the world an interesting place to be in. Again, as we said, as long as it doesn't contradict our religious identity, I think it's absolutely fine. And we look at the history of Islam when the time of the golden era of Islam, and when the empire stretched from China across to Europe. We see that they had different cuisines. The actual culture was allowed to flourish, and these were Muslim countries. These were Muslim states, but they were actually quite proud of their individuality, and they celebrated it. So I think that's really what makes us interesting.
I think also coming back to the point about the dress code for men in particular, I was reading a magazine article where the author was talking about, she's a doctor, and she was talking about she received a patient, and she was making sort of judgments about this patient according to his appearance. So he's wearing the long thobe and stuff, and she said, oh, he's definitely from an Arab origin. But when she went out to meet the family, the patient was from South Asian culture. So and she was sort of writing how he had totally confused her about who he was or where he was from, and I think that also raises another question about the youth in today's world, today's age, where they're kind of rejecting their own culture and adopting another culture which they think is Islamic, but isn't. But so they don't have that, they can't identify with their own ethnic origin.
Yeah, but what about you? You're a convert. You come from a different culture. How did you take up this challenge? Because surely, your culture was different to the Islamic culture.
Yeah, I mean, my family are from Punjab and they're Sikh, so it's a completely different culture. But I married into a Pakistani culture who are also from the Punjab. So there are lots of similarities. The language is the same, the food is the same, so there wasn't too much transition there. But I did feel I had to just let go of that Punjabi culture for a while and felt like I just needed to adopt. I felt that was in my past. That was before I converted.
So you embraced the Islamic culture.
Yeah, the sort of Pakistani Islamic culture first, and then after a few years, I came to the the understanding. That okay, this is Pakistani culture, and this is Islamic culture. And they don't often mix, and you have to kind of weed it out a little bit, which can be quite difficult for converts because it's not that apparent in the beginning.
What do you do when there's a contradiction between the Islamic culture and the Islamic identity and the cultural identity?
Well, I think Islam has to take precedence.
And how do you know that there's a contradiction? That is,
I think that comes with knowledge. If you're studying the deen, you go to classes, you do online classes.
Because there's a lot of things in our culture today which we think is from Islam, but it's not from Islam. And the only way we can understand, realize that it's not from Islam, is by studying Islam.
And I think that, you know, it's a learning process. There's no end. There's a start to it, but there's no end to it. So I think that, you know, we should never feel, lose hope in that fact. I think that we should definitely make a start on the path of knowledge.
Absolutely, and never feel like we know it all. You know, we've studied a little bit and suddenly we know the deen. You know, it's always like you're saying, it's continuous. Yeah, absolutely.
We need to go for a short break now. So, dear viewers, we must go for a short break now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.